Welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio, the number one podcast for IT executives seeking insights on the impact and opportunities for innovation that automation is delivering to businesses around the world. Featuring thought leaders in AI, machine learning, orchestration, security automation, and the future of work. And now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone. My name is Guy Nadivi, and I'm the host of Intelligent Automation Radio. Our guest on today's episode is Joe Garber, Global Head of Strategy and Solutions for Microfocus, a British-based multinational software and IT business with over 10,000 employees worldwide. Now, those of you who have been around a while in the IT industry, like myself, will certainly be familiar with Microfocus, which was founded in 1976, just 1 year after Microsoft. Microfocus is involved with a number of different technologies these days, all with the goal of helping organizations digitally transform their operations, a market that's expected to reach almost $2 trillion in worldwide spending by 2022. Since our audience is keenly interested in all things digital transformation, we've asked Joe to come on the show and share some insights about the market in general and the state of digital transformation in particular. Joe, welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Joe, when I think of Microfocus, I think of COBOL. And that goes back to when I started in technology a few decades ago. And by the way, lest any of our listeners think COBOL is no longer relevant, according to one consulting firm, COBOL supports close to 90% of Fortune 500 business systems today. It comprises 65% of all active code used today, and it runs 85% of all business transactions. But COBOL clearly isn't the only thing Microfocus does, and I was intrigued to learn that Microfocus actually touts itself as a vendor that helps organizations seeking to power their own digital transformations. So can you please tell us a bit about this strategy and how a vendor so closely associated with the legacy reputation of COBOL is driving digital transformations?
Well, yeah, happy to. And my first response is you're absolutely correct. COBOL is a cornerstone of IT for so many companies around the world, and even today, to your point. And the key reason for that is it's generally serves as a system of record for some of the most core functions of the business. So companies maintain it's business critical, which is why we keep helping customers leverage it and innovate around it. So now if you've followed Microfocus as you have over the last 40 years plus that we've been in business, that portion of our company has certainly been with us the longest, and it would stand therefore to reason that you might think of us like that first. But it's also worth noting that a lot has changed in the last several years as Microfocus has grown precipitously via M&A and its own organic growth as well. And in fact, over the past few years, we've made about 15 acquisitions, including the software assets from Hewlett Packard Enterprise in 2017. So, during that time, we've built a portfolio of more than 300 product lines and have been methodically integrating them and aligning them to where we see the market going. And of course, where we see the market going is in the area of digital transformation, as a number of forces have been coming together to force executives to rethink their IT strategies and to become more digitally advanced. So that's what our customers were demanding of us, and that's where we've placed our emphasis from an R&D and an M&A perspective. So I think that answers your question on the evolution. Let me just tell you just briefly about what I think is the second part of your question. That's how do we actually help customers transform? And as we look closer at digital transformation, what we noted was that there was a common thread in what companies are really trying to do. They wanted to move faster. They wanted to have greater agility. They wanted to, frankly, secure what matters most and then leverage insights to drive value. And it turns out those four objectives aligned very closely to four core markets: enterprise DevOps, hybrid IT, security, risk and governance, and predictive analytics. And that's really where Microfocus plays today, and what we call the four core pillars of digital transformation. And I guess you could say, that we've evolved or transformed ourselves, if you will, to serve a market opportunity we felt was underserved at that macro level, and that's where we're laser focused today.
Okay, now speaking of digital transformations, it's been said, Joe, that the failure rate for digital transformation is as high as 84%, inferring, of course, that the success rate is only 16%. So, since this is now your bailiwick, what is your prescription for reversing those numbers?
Well, yeah, I have two parts of my answer to that question. The first is I think it's important to look at those statistics through the right lens. Digital transformation is a relatively new term still, and it's important to understand that this isn't a one and done or a short-term project. Oftentimes, companies are looking at a series of interrelated initiatives over a period of many years to digitally transform. So one takeaway as you look at those numbers is probably, it's still way too early for companies to be celebrating victory at this stage or determining if the overall plan was a success. So that's one thought in terms of how organizations can drive the success rate higher. Um, in my mind, the big answer isn't necessarily tied to what am I trying to solve, but instead how. How do I go about it? What we've seen over the last several years is that many organizations kick off a digital transformation project, and their first thought is that they need to start all over. Their belief is what they have right now isn't serving all their needs, and they need to essentially rip and replace everything and start fresh. And this will certainly get you bleeding edge technology, but what organizations often forget about is that they have some core business systems like COBOL, as we talked about earlier, that have been in place for many years, often with IP and processes that have evolved over time that are delivering real value. And often, these systems of record can't be recreated overnight, and especially without degrading ROI or introducing, added risk. So what we're seeing is a better solution, uh, which is to pursue a modernization strategy where you bring in technology that effectively bridges the old and the new. If you can find open, integrated, backwards compatible technology to supplement what you already have, you can effectively run and transform your company at the same time. That's what we talk about often as smart digital transformation. I believe that's how we can bring that success rate up.
Okay, now, smart digital transformation is creating a lot of demand for data to be fed into smart technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence systems to make predictions about all kinds of things. And this is still kind of viewed as a black art among many people. So, could you please break down for our audience from a high level perspective how putting data into one end of an analytics black box, so to speak, and getting predictions coming out the other end drives digital transformation?
Yeah, right. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are talked about quite a bit these days. And to your point, not just as a standalone, big data system as they were even in the recent past, though that's still very important, but in the context of digital transformation. I've spent a lot of my career actually talking about advanced analytics in one form or another. In fact, I actually have cut my teeth talking about advanced analytics and how it can streamline e-discovery or searching for relevant information for legal matters. So I have a lot of depth in what's called non-typical uses of AI and machine learning. And the first thing I'd say is it's really not a black box. If you break it down to the fundamentals, it's really kind of simple in terms of what's happening. Organizations need to access their information, understand it, drive efficiencies, and each one of those steps is complicated. Uh, you know, Being able to access all of your information, not just part of your information across the enterprise, not just in one repository, not just one geography, as an example. A key part of that process flow, if you will, is the understand part. And with structured information, typically, obviously in rows and columns, the challenge is the sheer volume. You need to be able to separate signal from noise, if you will, out of petabytes of information that come in from sensors and IoT devices and many other things. So you need technical horsepower to accomplish that in many cases, of course, many things else as well. And then with unstructured information, the challenge is a bit different. Here you have to understand the context to get what I often talk about is the aboutness of what you're analyzing. For example I always use is if I say to you, I'm thinking of a bridge, you probably think immediately of a structure over land, over water, or something along those lines. But if I change the context and say I just had dental work done, that's a different example, of course. And if I say I was playing cards with my grandmother, it's a different context. And so you need, that's the challenge with unstructured information, and you need to understand, your information from both sides to be able to gather insights and to drive the top and bottom line. And that's where we start to see the intersection with digital transformation. You're looking at the top line, you see organizations leveraging data mining to boost and sustain revenue, or chatbots to drive customer engagement, or even applying it to the DevOps world to improve, I should say, test automation. And on the bottom line, kind of the yin and the yang of where AI and machine learning intersect with digital transformation, you see organizations improving quality and delivery with AI ops to reduce event volumes and get to the root cause sooner, automating the back office, as is the case, of course, with RPA, or even helping manage risk with user entity and behavior analytics, looking for insider threats, abnormal logins, time of work processes, those types of things. So you can see that AI machine learning has widespread benefits to the organization as it tightly integrated to digital transformation. In fact, I'd say a robust analytics ecosystem may be one of the most important things you should look for as you start to formulate your digital transformation strategy.
So let's drill down a bit on some of the abstracts you referenced with real world examples.
Mhm.
Can you talk about some interesting use cases you've been involved with at Microfocus, which highlight the impact that analytics and automation had on your clients' projects in particular and digital transformation in general?
Yeah, absolutely. We have about 40,000 customers around the globe and 6,000 partners and alliances we work with. So we have a number of really interesting stories to tell about how organizations are leveraging our technology to evolve and digitally transform. I'll give you a couple of examples. And I'll put them kind of in categories. One way our customers are using our technology is to drive efficiency. As I said, we have a company that's using our predictive analytics technology as the cornerstone of sustainable farming. They have 120 million acres of geospatial and satellite imagery and are using our technology to optimize farming resources and maximize their yield. Another is monitoring healthcare worker efficiency by analyzing electronic medical records. And in fact, they've even used this information to model sepsis and save lives, hundreds of lives that they've been able to identify at this point. And we have, of course, retail companies, many of them that use us to forecast accurate sales, to track sales, to provide improvements in merchandise allocation and distribution, just as some examples there. Another way that our customers are using us is to manage risk with analytics and automation. Big transportation authority uses us to monitor things like bike lanes to keep people safer and apply tickets to people that are swerving in and out of lanes. And in fact, they actually use our technology to triangulate data from multiple different sources like video surveillance and license plate tracking and even social media feeds to proactively detect terrorist threats. Or, a government agency in the Middle East uses us to monitor devices like pipe leaks to make sure their citizens have access to some basic things and needs that they have, like water, which of course is especially important in the Middle East. And in fact, other customers are using our technology to effectively build their products and drive the business. For instance, the biggest broadcaster in Spain uses us to analyze archive programming data and understand what their customers' interests are, and then help produce new content faster. So you can see there are many applications of our analytics and our automation technology that are being applied to many different facets of digital transformation in many interesting ways.
With 40,000 customers, I'm sure you hear lots of different perspectives as feedback. So I'm curious, Joe, what do you think are some of the most unrealistic expectations currently plaguing the field of analytics and automation?
I think the big one is that technology is a panacea. That there is much that technology can do for us, but without active human interaction and management, it won't be as efficient as possible. And again, there's a reason for this. Humans generally understand context better than technology. We intuitively know if something seems wrong based on our experience and can take action to optimize and correct. And you see that in terms of process automations. You need to have a human involved in the process, often not always, but often to develop seed sets and help educate machine learning and to monitor and tune the technologies that moves along in the process. So that's one. I think the other is something that I alluded to earlier, and that's digital transformation isn't something you can do quickly and without. And I think this is really important. A long-term commitment from senior management, things tend to fall apart. Again, digital transformation, I should say, isn't something you can ask a single team to do in a single quarter or a year. It requires a series of interrelated initiatives by a broad set of teams over a long period of time to get it right. So if you expect too much too soon, or worse, keep kind of moving the goalposts and what you're trying to accomplish, you're bound to realize suboptimal results.
Digital transformation still relies on humans, and humans have fears. And on this show, we occasionally talk about robophobia, which is a term to describe people's fear of automation, particularly as it pertains to the impact it might have on the nature of their job or even their employment. Have you experienced much robophobia in the digital transformation projects you've been involved in at Microfocus? And if so, how did you address that?
That's a good question. In some cases, the answer is yes. At least at the outset, there are technologies. I've mentioned RPA already. There are certainly others that are in use right now that are very clearly replacing the roles of some employees. What I would is heartening to hear in many cases, however, is that what you're seeing these displaced employees being having done is they're being retrained to add value to the company in new and different ways. Generally speaking, and I think this is important as well, they're adding to their resume and they're becoming even more valuable in the workforce, which ends up paying off for both them and the company in the short and the long term. So, as an employee, the way you address this is to be open-minded and to not be afraid of change. Even in my role, I see colleagues leave the company or struggle when they aren't able or willing to adapt to new technology, even if it's something simple, being introduced like collaboration or reporting software. So that's kind of the employee perspective on how to best address that. From an organization perspective, you address this best by clearly defining objectives and laddering up to new technology to those objectives so employees understand why the change is happening. And then, of course, providing training and classes on how to adapt and a heavy dose of communication to stay in touch with your staff to make sure that that fear doesn't really take over.
The analytics field is heavily dependent on data scientists. In August of 2018, LinkedIn published a workforce report stating that there was a nationwide deficit of over 150,000 data scientists. How do you think the analytics profession can overcome this staggering talent shortage?
Well, clearly you're seeing supply increases, more people take classes in trade schools on the topic. But the question is, will that be enough to match what's sure to be even greater demand? At minimum, organizations are probably hoping to at least drive down the hourly rate of some of the data scientists that they're able to command. But right now, I'd say I'm seeing two ways that software vendors, technology is helping close that skills gap, if you will. The first is the technology itself is helping. For instance, you've got in-database machine learning that can be used to streamline each stage of the learning process from data preparation to deployment with existing data engineers and database experts that are already familiar with a given language. And then secondly, you have key improvements that are being made from a usability standpoint to help organizations operationalize machine learning at scale, such as enabling data engineers to import models that are being built by data scientists in other platforms and languages. And I find that really encouraging. By leveraging technology to scale, it's possible that any analytics skills gap, perceived or real, won't be a roadblock to digital transformation.
Joe, for the CIOs, CTOs, and other IT executives listening in, what is the one big must-have piece of advice you'd like them to take away from our discussion with regards to driving digital transformation through analytics and automation?
Well, the question I seem to keep getting lately because it's so topical, and frankly, we're all living through the same thing right now, is what impact does the current pandemic mean to digital transformation planning and action? And it should have an impact and have no impact at all. And fundamentally, what organizations need to do right now in response to a changing work reality isn't all that different to what you already needed to know that you needed to do already. And that's to move faster, to have greater agility, to secure what matters most, and to leverage insights to drive value. So I'd say, don't take your eye off that ball. And in fact, our research is telling us that those companies that are already, well down the path, or at least even starting the path of digital transformation, are now responding more quickly and efficiently to the new requirements. I just saw a story today from an Austrian engineering company that was told that on Friday, that the vast majority of their staff needed to work remotely the following Monday. And they report that they had 95% of their team working virtually with collaboration tools in accordance with GDPR requirements, which is of course important, within minutes, for example. So, while the framework should remain consistent, both because it's looking at kind of a longer term horizon and because it's applicable to much of what you need to do to right now, you should also be conscious that you have new concerns as well, and have those top of mind. The questions that are coming up are, how do I prepare for additional online traffic? Or how do I pinpoint and resolve issues quickly? How do I get information out quickly to remote workers? Or how do I prepare and stress test for the stress test of my network or NOM? Or how do I make sure that my employees can get access to the things they need to, but not get access or have access to the things that they shouldn't? Those are all questions that need to be looked at through the context of the framework that you've already had put in place, and apply some of these new technologies and look at the problem holistically, so you can solve the problems of today and tomorrow. So, my big recommendation to close is, stay focused, look at these new requirements again through the lens of digital transformation, and of course, look for a technology vendor who can support both your immediate and your long-term needs as things evolve.
All right. Looks like that's all the time we have for on this episode of Intelligent Automation Radio. Joe, given that Microfocus is one of the biggest pure play software companies focused on digital transformation, you've really given us all a lot of insights on the direction of the market. And I thank you very much for coming in today and sharing your thoughts with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Joe Garber, Global Head of Strategy and Solutions for Microfocus. Thank you for listening, everyone. And remember, don't hesitate, automate. Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We publish new shows regularly, and you won't want to miss one. And please remember to give us a rating. It helps others find the show. Intelligent Automation Radio is sponsored by IAHU, the leader in intelligent automation solutions for IT and cybersecurity. You can get more information about IAHU by visiting our website at iahu.com. That's AYEHU.com. IAHU, creating the successful path to the self-driving enterprise.